up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. You are watching The Nerdy Narrative. Welcome. Thank you for popping in to see what's going on over here in my little corner of BookTube. Today is going to be a recent reads update, a check-in on everything that I have been reading, a little bit about what you can expect to see coming on the channel, and just chatting in general. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, those of you that celebrate. I did. We snuck home to Mississippi to see our families, kept it really small and low-key. We were only there 4 days if you subtract the 2 long days of driving from Central Florida to Mississippi. Had a great time, did some good eating, enjoyed she says sarcastically, enjoyed some cooler weather, but we did get to see a little bit of fall foliage. The trees are still changing color over Mississippi, so it was really pretty. The pups, Bandit and Milo, really enjoyed getting to go outside in the backyards and run between their grandparents' house and their great-grandparents' house. And another interesting Thanksgiving experience I had this year. So every year back home in Mississippi, our local running store, Fleet Feet, sponsored a Turkey Day 8K. It happened on Thanksgiving morning. You get up at the crack of dawn, you go run 4.5, 5 miles with 1,000 other runners in the area, then you go home and you eat all the rest of the day guilt-free. So of course, I got online, I looked around to see if there was one here locally, and I found one. What I didn't know, though I should have, when I saw that it took place at Southern Hills Farm, the word farm should have clued me in that this was not going to be a pavement race. I am a pavement runner. Y'all, I am very, very accident prone. When I got the email about packet pickup and it told us where to park, it said you're gonna park in a field. And oh, by the way, this is a trail run. And I thought, uh-oh. Not only that, it rained 5 days in a row here, which has never happened in the 4 years that I've lived here. I got to the farm and I thought, I'm just gonna check it out. It was sand. We ran on sandy roads around and through this farm. Now, it was absolutely beautiful. They had a peach tree orchard, tons of blueberries, sunflowers, there was some corn. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous day, but I'm not gonna lie, it was extremely difficult to run through that sand. Will I do it again? Yes. It was challenging, it was fun. I had a good time. I burned tons of calories and I ate guilt-free. I have always been honest about my running. It is not for exercise. It is strictly so that I can eat any and everything that I want to. So now let's move into the book-related portion of this video. But before I get into the books, I do have to stop and give a huge shout out to my newest top tier patron, Jennifer M. Thank you so much for joining the Nerdy Narrative Patreon community. I am so grateful and full of gratitude for all of the patrons that support the channel and help defray some of the costs that goes into putting this on and keeping it going. It's not a very expensive endeavor, but it does have a few little costs to it. So thank you all so much. Now let's get into all the stuff that I've read, and I'm just going to run through it because, guys, I did manage to find a lot of time to read, so let's talk about it. We'll start with all of the things that I finished. First up is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, another hit for me. I'm really enjoying these fairy tale retellings that she's doing. She gives them a little bit of a horror twist, a little bit of a dark twist. She basically asks herself a question, a what if question, and then she explores that in her own retelling. And in this one, it's a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but instead of focusing on the princess, we are focused on a little fairy named Toadling. Within minutes of being born, she was stolen from her family by fairies and taken into the land of the Fae, where she was fortunately taken in and raised there in a loving environment. And of course, those of you who have ever read any story dealing with the Fae, you know nothing is ever simple, nothing is ever what it seems. There's always an ulterior motive. And in this case, once Toadling grows up, one of the fairy gods comes to her and says, we need you to go back into the land of the humans and deliver a blessing onto a child there. And this is that story, and it's so good. It did kind of get off to a little bit of a rough start for me. For some reason with T. Kingfisher, when she writes fantasy, I have a hard time getting into her prose just for the first chapter. I have to read it very slowly. I do a lot of rereading, and I have to really concentrate update on what's going on, and I kind of wonder if I'd immersion read it with the audiobook, if that would have helped. Not sure. I did not do the audio with this one at all. It was strictly a physical read. Would absolutely recommend it, especially if you read Nettle and Bone and you enjoyed it. Give this one a shot. And fun fact, this one was written before Nettle and Bone, but the publisher chose to go with that one and one other one of hers. They published those two first, and this one was next. Next up, out of the collection Side Jobs, I read The Warrior. For those of you who may be new, I have been rereading the Dresden Files, and I've been putting in all of the short stories and graphic novels, so I'm reading everything in chronological order. I read The Warrior. I think that may be one of my favorite short stories I've read to date. It is about one of my favorite characters, Michael, and we see him in not a new light, because he is the same as he's always ever been, but it's more nuanced. We get a little bit of an insight to, well, I don't want to say that because it will be a spoiler to those of you who haven't read the series yet. And then staying with the Dresden Files for a moment longer, out of the other short story collection, Briefcases, I read Curses. And this one was really fun because the Dresden Files takes place mostly in the city of Chicago, where Harry the Wizard lives. At the time that Curses was written or requested for the anthology that it went into originally, the Dresden Files was about at the halfway point of where it is now. Longtime fans of the series began to ask Jim Butcher, how come you never talk about the curse of the Cubs in any of the books? And so that's what he did here, and it was really funny. And then right after Curses, I kept going back to Side Jobs, and I read Last Call, another favorite short story. This is one where, I mean, I can't talk about it because it's such a huge spoiler for some of the characters, but this one featured a hilarious incident where Harry just wanted to go get a beer. Even if you've only read the first book in the series, you know who Mac is. He works at the tavern, he makes his own beer, and somebody decides they're going to target Mac. And Harry lands in the middle of it because he's going to get a beer, and the poor guy wants a beer and ends up with, oh my goodness, it was hilarious. It was so hilarious. I would just highly recommend, if you've never read the short stories, definitely do that. The graphic novels I think you can live without, but the short stories really just add something to the Dresden verse. Next, I finished The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. That is the second installment in her Molly the Maid series. NetGalley and Ballantine Books came in clutch with the review of my request on NetGalley to read the book. So I moved things around, I read it, I loved it. I did film a full non-spoiler review, which I will link in the cards and down in the description box below if you want to check that one out. It is a standalone of the series. If you have not read the first book in the series, you could absolutely start with The Mystery Guest, but I would recommend starting with The Maid, because The Maid, in my opinion, gives you a better introduction to the main character of Molly Gray. I also finished my reread of New Spring, which is actually the prequel novella to the Wheel of Time series, but I have seen many people recommend reading it after book 10. You can absolutely read it before the series. You can read it after book 5. But I got a whole lot more enjoyment after book 10 because all of the characters that are listed here, you will not have met if you haven't read through the 10th book in the series, if that makes any type of sense. Is it required? No, you can read this book whenever you want to, whether you read it first or whether you read it last. The story that is held within these pages is so good. It gives you the backstory of 3 of our main characters. It just provides depth and insight, how they first met. It's got humor. I loved it. Just absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorites of the series. And it's not because it's a small one. It's just a good story. That's everything that I have finished since the last time I updated you guys. Let's talk about all of the things that I am reading currently. I did start the 3rd book in the War of Last Day trilogy by Kareem Solomon. The book is titled Reign of Demons. I'm around about the halfway mark with that one. I'm taking my time with it, trying to make it last because it's the last book in a series and I really have enjoyed this series. I'll include the written reviews for the first 2 books down in the description below if you want to check those out. The time that I read the first 2, they were included in Kindle Unlimited, and I'm pretty sure Reign of Demons is too. I also saw there was this huge sale on Black Friday where a ton, I think around 150 books were included. Self-published or independently published books were on sale. I nabbed a whole bunch of them, and I saw one by Kareem Solomon, and I'm pretty sure it's either a collection or a novella. It's something that said it had something to do with the War of the Last Day, or maybe it said something about Gorania, which is the continent that all of this takes place in. I don't know. I don't care. I'm gonna read it. I love Kareem Solomon's writing style. But getting back to the book that started that whole ramble, Reign of Demons. Not much I can tell you about it since it is the 3rd book in a series. What I will say is it takes place on this continent of Gorania, and what's happened is there is a faction of people who have decided that they want to reclaim this continent. They want to conquer and wipe out all of the people that have settled there. They're called the Koyans, and they're using another people called the Ogonians to conquer, to vanquish. And these Ogonians, if you kill them, they have a demon inside them that takes over. It will resurrect that body and uses its influence over that person to eventually take over and take their true demonic form. And so the people of Gorania, those that are surviving at this point, are trying to figure out how are they going to fight these immortal beings. It's so action-packed. I love it. I love the magic system. We have many main characters whose points of view that we follow. I think right now my favorite viewpoint is still Layla. Nardine's is getting really interesting. Halgrim and Zara is really interesting. I mean, at this point I should just say I'm enjoying all of them because I think I literally just listed all of the points of view. So that one is going really well for me. For my audiobook, I lucked up because, as you all are probably aware, Audible had a huge site-wide sale for Black Friday, and I decided to get on there and take a look to see if there were any of my upcoming reads that had audiobooks. And turns out there were 4 or 5 on sale that I'm planning to read in December, so I snatched them up. One of those being The Failed Technomancer by Boo Ludlow. It's narrated by the author, who does a phenomenal job. I really love when an author narrates their own book because they put the emphasis where it goes. They read it like they wrote it, if that makes any type of sense. They know exactly where the emotion needs to be ramped up. He does really well with the voices of his characters because some of his characters aren't human. The title of the series is Robot Cannibal Apocalypse. This story opens up, we meet a character named 64-Bit. He is a young acolyte of the guardian technomancer of a settlement called Fort. Technomancers are who stand in the gap to protect what's left of humanity against these man-eating robots. And how they do this is because technomancers are able to control technology, robots, except 64-Bit is having issues in that department. And then there's an accident that renders the guardian technomancer, his master, his mentor, useless. He's in a coma. And then guess what happens? The man-eating robots attack Fort. And now what's 64-Bit to do? So I'm really enjoying that one a whole lot. Can't wait to review it when I get done for y'all. Let's see, anything else? Have I told y'all about the 2 web serials that I have been reading lately? I can't remember. Now, one I started reading last year or the year before called A Mini Tale. It is completely free. It's a website. I will link it down below. A Mini Tale is a cosmic fantasy web serial about a mouseling called Opaline. Each episode is from his perspective. He's called a world walker. He has been cursed to blip from world to world through time and space, and he never knows how long he's going to be in any given place. He has a little top that was given to him by a tiny dragon that's as big as your fingernail named Peridot, and he can tell how long he might have left in a place by how many times it spins. So if it spins one time and falls over, that means he's going to be there a very, very short time, and then of course the longer it spins means a much longer time. Every time Opaline blips to a new place, he gets involved. He makes a decision, whether it's to join a potential fight that's happening, a war, whether it's having a discussion or simply playing with a child. It's so interesting getting his perspective as he learns about himself, and sometimes he visits places where there is clearly evidence that he will come there again or has been there before. It's pretty much just a story of love, purpose, and willpower, and you just don't forget these characters. Like I said, I started reading it a couple of years ago, and I wondered if I picked up where I left off, would I remember what I had read? And they're so unique and interesting and odd, like I mentioned, that it just came right back to me. So really been enjoying getting back into a mini tale. Again, I'm going to have that linked in the description box below, completely read to free, as well as the other one that I'm reading, which I'm reading on Royal Road, and this one's called Arkindrithist. I believe this one is about to be completed and published as a print book. It is very, very long. It's been going on for 4 years, and it's addictive. It's almost like you're reading about the story of Eric Flatt and his daughter Jane in real time. And if you're someone like me who has ever spent any amount of time in a video game that was role-playing, lit RPG, MMORPGs, like I've played World of Warcraft for 5 years, like that was my life. And that's what it feels like to me. So Eric is a social worker. He's driving with his adult daughter Jane. I want to say she's 22. She's just finished college, or she's about to finish college, and she's telling her dad that she is going into a training program with the CIA. Of course, he's upset because it's a very dangerous job. And they encounter this being, and Eric smarts off to it, and this being portals them to this other world called Veered. And so this web serial is about them finding a settlement, getting settled, getting jobs, learning how to use the magic system. It's one of those that is just a delight to read. That's everything that I am currently working my way through. What I will be getting into next after I finish Reign of Demons, I'm gonna start this first book in a new series by Nick Stevenson called Nethergeist. All I know is there's a character called Emperor Goat. I got to know, does that mean something? Is that a name that they're calling this guy because they don't like him, because he apparently thinks he is God and should be worshipped as such and taken over the world? They just call him a goat because they're being ugly, or is that this guy's name? Don't I just have the burning questions about these books? It's supposed to have a lot of action, some really intense battles, some snappy dialogue, and supposedly in the vein of books like The Blade Itself and the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. So I'm in for that. I will absolutely update you guys as soon as it gets started. Also in my sights is picking up book 11 of the Wheel of Time series, Knife of Dreams. I'm going to be rereading this one. I can't really remember much about this one. It's definitely one of my least read books of the series because I am one of those that got started reading the Wheel of Time when it first started publishing, and y'all know me, every time a new book in a series comes out, I reread all of the previous books. So the first 8 or 9 books got read the most, and the later books got read the least. So I don't really remember this one, so it's almost going to be like I'm reading it for the first time. I'm excited, especially coming off such a good time with rereading New Spring. And then the last one here in the stack of what is next on the TBR is The Return of the Night by Gregory Contaxis. I'm actually going to read this one, and then he recently published a prequel novella that is in this series that I'm going to read right behind it. I've learned my lesson in series. Read them in publication order, not chronological order. At least not for the first time through. On a reread, chronological all the way, but first time, publication gives you the best satisfaction. At least it does for me. So I'm excited to read this one. From what I remember, there is a kingdom that's very weak. The queen is pretty much out of resources, and there's this bad guy that's really bad, but his name is Walter. I love when really vile villains have such ordinary, harmless sounding names like Walter. But then there is this one solitary knight who is trying to help this queen recover. He's trying to go around and reforge alliances that once existed between those people and this queen. At the same time as he's doing that, he is trying to keep Walter busy so that he's not focused on taking down the queen. And if my memory serves me correctly, this one was compared to Game of Thrones mixed with Greek mythology. A lot of war, medieval lore, magic, loyalty, bravery, just all of the good ingredients for a good epic fantasy. So that is going to take care of me today. We are 100% caught up. Everything I've read, what I'm currently working through, and what I plan to read next. Thank you all so much for being here, for spending a little bit of your time with me this morning. I hope you're all getting into the holiday spirit. I cannot believe it is December 1st. This year has flown by, just flown by. But I am so excited for 2024. Oh, that reminds me, there's going to be a lot of updates coming up on the channel, just talking about some plans for 2024. So if you're excited to see what I'm going to be up to, make sure you have hit that subscribe button. Y'all take care, and I will see you in the next one.